It being 4 o'clock and there is a quorum in the room, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And our very first order of business today is the happy occasion we get to swear in a new member of the Ottawa Police Services Board. So I'd like to introduce you to Daljit Nerman, who will be joining the board, and I'd like to ask David White to swear in our new member. Okay, welcome Member Nerman to the Police Services Board, and we'll get right to work. Start with confirmation of, confirmation of the agenda. Confirmed, thank you. Confirmation of minutes 2 of January 20th, 2019. Carried. And minutes 3 from February 6th, 2019. Carried. Declaration of interest. Seeing none, committee meeting reports. Member Smallwood.
The Finance and Audit Committee met on February the 20th. We received public delegations on the budget. The Chief also reported back to the committee based on direction he received at the budget tabling to 1. Prepare a budget options list that moderates the service's reliance on new revenue sources in its 2019 budget, and 2, present possible fee structure options for background checks that are not full cost recovery for youth 18 and under, as well as non-profit organizations. I will be moving a motion this evening to amend the budget based on the discussions that took place at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting.
Okay, so any questions on that? Seeing none received. And just because this is a new term for the board, I mentioned that Vice Chair Smallwood was elected the chair of the Finance and Audit Committee. And then the Human Resources Committee, I was chosen to chair that committee, and here is my report. The Human Resources Committee met in camera on Friday, February 22nd, to consider recommendations with respect to the recruitment process for the Chief and the Director General positions, as both are retiring in Q2. In the interest of public transparency, we decided to report publicly on the recommendations we are bringing forward to the board for approval. I know there are many questions from the membership and the community. The committee is recommending the board run nationwide searches for both positions and that the competitions be held concurrently. We will be reviewing proposals from executive search firms with experience in recruiting chiefs of police in the coming weeks. We will have more certainty around timelines once a firm is selected and can advise us accordingly. But I think we all know that selecting the chief is probably one of the most important things this board will do this term, and with that in mind, we plan to take the time necessary to select the very best candidate. As part of the recruitment process, the board intends on consulting the public early on in terms of what they want to see in their next chief of police. The board will also be holding a visioning exercise as part of the process to ensure we have a common understanding and vision for our governance role and the future of policing in Ottawa. Vice Chair Smallwood, I believe you have motions to put forward in this regard.
Yes, I do. The first motion is, whereas the Chief of Police will be retiring effective the 4th of May 2019, and whereas the Director General will be retiring the 30th of April 2019, therefore be it resolved that the Ottawa Police Services Board first approve a national search be held for the position of Chief of Police. Second, approve a national search be held for the position of Director General. Approve that the searches be run concurrently. Approve the request for assistance of the City of Ottawa Human Resources staff to obtain 3 proposals for full-service recruitment from executive search firms with experience in recruiting chiefs of police. Approve that authority be delegated to the Human Resources Committee to select an executive search firm from the proposals obtained to run both the national search for a Chief of Police as well as a Director General. And finally, to approve that authority be delegated to the Human Resources Committee to approve the written collateral required to proceed with the national searches, such as ads, candidate briefs, etc., with the exclusion of any materials related to the final interviews of the candidates, such interview questions which will come to the board for discussion and final approval.
Are there any questions on the motion? Or any discussion at all on the motion? Yes. Seeing none, is that carried? Yes. Thank you.
And I have an additional motion, which is, whereas the composition of the board has changed significantly in the past few months, and whereas the board would like to ensure it has a common understanding and vision for its governance role, and whereas the board would like to ensure the recruitment processes it will be undertaking for executive leadership positions at the Ottawa Police Service is reflective of its common vision. Therefore, be it resolved that the Ottawa Police Services Board undergo a facilitated visioning exercise as soon as is feasible.
Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, can we carry that? Carried. Thank you. Okay, is that it, Vice Chair Smallwood? Okay, thank you for that. Moving on to the agenda, we'll just go through the consent agenda first. Are there any inquiries? Seeing none. Items of business, the Chief's verbal report. We'll hold that and come back. Item number 2, 2019 draft operating and capital budgets, public delegations and approval. There are a number of public delegations, and there is a presentation, so we'll hold that and return to it. And that item will also have the modernization roadmap presentation as well. Item number 3, construction fit-up contract award for Elgin A Phase 1 and delegated authority for Elgin A Phase 2. Can we carry that? Carry? Yeah. Thank you. That money for that was approved in 2018. This is just delegating authority to carry out the contract. Item number 4, addendum to 2016 to 2018 business plan closeout report. Received? Received. Thank you. Item number 5, response to inquiry number 11901, Ottawa Police Charge Sheet Form. I know it was Member Valaket who had asked for that. She's unable to be with us this evening, but I think it's fair to say that her concern has been addressed. So we can carry that, receive that. Thank you. Item number 6, workforce management report 4th quarter 2018. So this needs to be received and approved. Can we do that? Carried? Thank you. Item number 7, positive workplace 2018 annual report. Received? Item number 8, quality assurance 2018 annual report, compliance with ministry standards. Received? Item number 9, performance report 4th quarter 2018, received. Item number 10, report on SIU investigation. Received. Item number 11, outstanding board inquiries and motions, February 2019, received. And item 12, letters of commendation, received. Okay. So returning then to the held items, we'll start with item number 1, Chief's verbal report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. The past month has been a very active month for our police service, and I want to thank our members for the calls that they've been responding to and the proactive police work and investigations that they've been involved in. Last Wednesday, we began an investigation after a man was found badly injured in his Vanier apartment. The man later died of those injuries, leading to the arrest of another man for second-degree murder this weekend. We also saw 4 arrests in an ongoing community policing project targeting problem addresses in the Vanier area. Our community police officer in the area has received a list of addresses where drug trafficking and consumption are known to occur. Various sections in our service, including our Bikes and Beaks sections, are targeting those addresses for investigation. We're also working with the City of Ottawa to ensure landlords are part of this solution, and we expect to hear more about this work soon. I want to thank the investigators involved in laying charges in relation to sexual assaults against 4 children between 2004 and 2019. We announced those charges on Friday. The dedication of the investigators in this team and on this case make us all very proud. I also want to thank the officers and the city staff who searched the Trail Road landfill for 3 weeks for the body of Susan Kuplu. The discovery of her remains was important to her family and many in our community and to the investigation into this homicide. And I also want to commend our special events team's officers for their exceptional work during the 2-day pipeline protest of truckers who came from Alberta. We received multiple compliments both from the organizers of the protest but also residents of the city about the quality and level of professionalism shown by our team. The arrival of a convoy of trucks to our nation's capital was a logistical challenge that was seamlessly coordinated by our team and also included escort of our traffic service officers. It's a great example of teamwork and ensured the safety of both the protesters and residents while minimizing the impact to our commuters. We also saw the successful resolution to the Abdullah Al-Tutunji case before the courts earlier this month, after a man was found guilty of his murder. Abdullah and his family had fled violence and instability in Iraq for a new life in Canada in 2009, and it's tragic that he was killed in an altercation with a stranger here in Ottawa. Our marine, dive, and trail officers were kept busy this month, ensuring that residents were obeying the laws when operating snowmobiles. This education campaign to enhance off-road safety resulted in 36 traffic stops, 28 provincial offences notice issued, 1 ticket issued for failing to produce an insurance card, and 3 tickets issued for having no license. We will continue to conduct random checks to ensure that all those who are out enjoying our city's snowmobile routes are doing so both safely and legally. And I ran into Councillor DeRuse earlier, who was very appreciative of the efforts, but also mentioned that we needed new snowmobiles. So that'll be a submission in next year's budget. We also saw 2 individuals revived by officers carrying police-issued naloxone. These are the calls and investigations that we hear about in the media, but there's so many more stories that are never told. Now, here's a letter we received about one of those calls. I'm writing to express my most sincere gratitude to a few of your officers who came to my son's help. That day, my son, who has been battling mental health challenges and addictions for a long time, called 911 threatening suicide. While I wish 911 had just sent a paramedic to take him to the hospital, they dispatched the police, and since he had locked himself in, things escalated. And soon there were many officers there, including the tactical unit. However, they never lost their cool and kept his mental condition and young age in mind, and treated him with the utmost dignity and kindness. They went above and beyond just their duty and acted compassionately, and finally got him to the hospital with paramedics. Had your men and women not been the compassionate human individuals they are, and obviously educated and familiar with the psychology of mental illness, I don't know what would have happened to my child. I thank you for hiring such people, and I sincerely hope they get acknowledged for their amazing work. Madam Chair, that's my verbal report for this month.
Well, thank you very much, Chief. Any questions? Seeing none, received? Okay, item number 2, the 2019 draft operating and capital budgets. We're going to ask Ms. Fraser to do a presentation, and then it will be followed by, we have numerous public delegations. Where's the other one? Is she here? Yes. Did she register? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've had quite a discussion on the budget this year, the latest one being at the Finance and Audit Committee last week. So we'd like to take a few minutes, if we could now, to summarize the discussion. And you'll see that we've made some adjustments to the options that we recommended to reflect the discussion that we had at FAC. And then the board will be in the position to review and approve the budget, which is our goal tonight. So to position the discussion this year, here's a summary of the key milestones that we've been through in order to come here tonight. So we started the budget with an $18 million net requirement. That means that that's the increase that's required to be added to the budget to operate in 2019. That number at the start was equivalent to a 5.1% tax increase. And the board asked us to go and have a discussion with the city to see what we could do to manage the impact of the increase. So we had a discussion with the city treasurer, and 3 sources of revenue were identified as a way to help bring the budget more in line with a 3% increase. One of them, red light camera revenue, is a new source of ongoing revenue for the police. It relates to cameras that are being installed in 2019, and it will continue into the future. The tax stabilization revenue of $4.8 million is a one-time revenue source, and that comes forward with requires council's blessing. A grant of $500,000 related to the federal government's gun violence initiatives can also be posted in 2019, so that was our 3rd source of revenue. At the tabling of the budgets themselves, the mayor's comments identified that an envelope of $2.4 million was more in line with what was expected for one-time revenue for the police. That changed the horizon for us, resulting in a $2.4 million gap in support. And so we worked on that and presented the options to the Finance and Audit Committee last week. We've been working on the options for quite a while, actually. That comes about in our world with consultation with the operational people, the superintendents, the chief officers, and we came up with some criteria to guide our decision-making on what would be acceptable options to present. So the first criteria is that there be no impact on frontline services to residents. We did not want any impact on the staffing plan to increase community policing, violence against women, and the traffic staff. That's the plan for an increase of 30 this year. The savings had to be achievable in year, which is a bit of a challenge since we're almost in March. We had a look at how much risk we thought we could handle in the budget. And sometimes because we're now formulating the budget 2 months into the year, there's new information that comes forward that enables us to adjust our budget estimates. We also had a look at what we thought we could defer to 2020, meaning that there were some programs we thought we would start in 2019, and we're prepared to push them into 2020, and you'll see that we've carried a budget forward for that purpose. So here's the list of that we're tabling today, and I'm going to go through it a bit one by one because we've added, some of these are changes from the FAC presentation, and I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with what we're presenting. So I'll just spend a little minute on the mechanics. You can see that it adds up to $2.4 million. That's the amount that we're seeking in order to close the one-time revenue gap. The item is on the left-hand side, and the impact it will have on the budget, meaning whether it lowers it or increases it, is shown on the right-hand side. If it's got brackets, it lowers the budget. No brackets, it increases the budget. So as we start from the top, you'll see that we are recommending a small reduction to overtime. We've actually increased within the budget envelope the budget for overtime, but we felt we could adjust it somewhat, meaning that at the same time we need to manage it carefully, and you'll see that there are controls in place and monitoring to ensure that we can live within the budget envelope we've proposed. In terms of the new information that's come forward in the budget, you'll see that we're recommending now that we reduce our pay-as-you-go contributions by $0.6 million. Pay-as-you-go, those are it's as if you're contributing money to a savings account so that you can pay for things as you do them. And what we're recommending here is that we reduce that pay-as-you-go contribution by $0.6 million. You'll see that when Jeff talks about the capital budget, there are 3 areas where we've reduced the capital budget so that it now matches with the reduced envelope. What you don't see here is the recommendation that we increase our CRC revenue estimate. The discussion around that item is that there's too much risk in it. We agree with that, so we've withdrawn that and put forward a pay-as-you-go reduction instead. The gapping target, you'll see that we've increased our estimate of the salary savings from gapping by $500,000. That reduces the budget. We've had a quite worthy discussion about gapping over the past 2 weeks. It reminds me of Accounting 101, actually. And we've come to agreement about how the city accounts for gapping and how the police service accounts for gapping. And we both agree we do it differently, but that we can support how one another do it. So last year, our gapping exceeded our budget estimate by $500,000. So we had a salary savings of $500,000 more than expected, and that's the amount that we budgeted this year. New to the list as well is paid duty revenue, an increase of $0.4 million. What underlies this estimate is the assumption that we will adopt a full cost recovery model for clients who are the city or private sector clients, meaning that the community-based and nonprofit organizations aren't part of this estimate, and the rates for those client groups will be adjusted to equal full cost recovery. That's about a 15% adjustment. The background check fee, I want to spend just a second, then I'm going to flip slides here. We had quite a discussion at the Finance and Audit Committee about the background check fee, the full cost recovery model that we introduced earlier this year. You're seeing that what we're doing here is assuming less revenue from the background check fee, which provides an envelope for an adjustment. And I'll just get the slides flipped over here. We'll just spend a minute on this. So what's coming forward in one of the motions tabled today is that we look at how to adjust the background check fees so that it fairly distributes costs amongst our various users and client groups. We'll need a bit of time to look at that because as you know, we have a significant number of clients and they have different affordability envelopes, and we certainly heard that at the FAC committee when the gentleman from the Y presented on behalf of the nonprofits. What we've done is included in this budget a $0.4 million envelope, so the board has some flexibility on how to adjust or phase in those fees. We'll table that plan in Q2. And just a reminder, this table is just a small reminder of the kinds of checks that we have. There are 3 different levels of them. And there are our client groups. In the employment area, we have folks from the nonprofit sector. The Y is an example of that kind of employer. And other sectors, Uber and Blue Line Taxi would be an example of the private sector users of our background checks. We also have volunteers. So when we come back to the board, you'll see that we're trying to balance the interests of all these groups against the board's budget. So going back to the list, then we pick up at the fuel budget. We're reducing the estimate of fuel cost. We've been budgeted at $1.08. We'll be budgeted at 98 cents as that's the equivalent pump price. That's where fuel is trending right now. So we feel that's an acceptable adjustment. We'll be making some across-the-board cuts onto our base budget as well in the area of travel, training, supplies, and services, and that will be equivalent to $0.4 million savings. When I spoke of us deferring programs to 2020, here are the three examples. There were some new services planned in the area of community development, and our legal cost budget needs to be realigned. We'll be deferring that to 2020. Our CID project fund, we have a significant project fund that we used for the activities that CID needs to pursue their objectives. We're hoping to take that up by $100,000 next year. And we also will be planning to armor the long barrel weapons that the military gave us, otherwise known as carbines, and we'll postpone that to 2020. We have enough funding available to armor the amount that we need for our use this year. Madam Chair, you didn't see us put a number towards back office integration, but we really believe that this is this is an idea that has a lot of value. We're expecting that in the motion coming forward that we'll be asked to pursue this area, and it makes a lot of sense to do it now. OPS has launched its modernization program. We'll show you where we're at with that. And the city is on a very similar track with its SAP modernization program. So there's kind of one of these once-in-a-lifetime opportunities to align those two programs, and which provides the backbone then for us to share services or to transfer services between one another. So we believe we should pursue this. The benefits of doing it would become more apparent both financially and in terms of enhanced service in 2020, and we can update the board in Q3 about what those plans look like. So here's what where the budget sits after the $2.4 million worth of options have been applied. So on the maintained services line, you see that that's the budget base in order for us to continue to do business at the service levels we have now. That budget base has dropped by $2.4 million, so it now sits at $9.7 million. And you'll see that we have reduced the expected one-time funding from the city down on that second to bottom line from $4.8 million to $2.4 million. So the 2.2 amount of budget cuts offsets the loss in revenue, and we are back to a 3% budget increase or $12.2 million as our net requirement. This is kind of the key figures behind the budget proposal. So what you see here is there's that $12.2 million of net budget increase at the top. If you skip over the next row, here's how it's funded. Assessment-based growth provides $4 million of the $12.2 million. The police tax rate increase of 3% provides $8.2. So those are the two ways in which the budget is funded. That produces a net operating budget of $306.5 million. So it's closer to $380 gross. For the average homeowner, that's an increase of $18 over last year, or $621. We always include a forecast, Madam Chair. This is a requirement under our governance obligations, and it provides the board and our other stakeholders with a feel for what's coming forward in the coming 3 years. So what you see is that in general, the police budget will be between 3.5 and 4.3%. The 4.3 estimate assumes that there is further funding of $2.4 million from the city on a one-time basis in 2020. What you see, I think, overall is the general trend in police services, that there are very few areas where costs are dropping for policing. Because we're so reliant, we're such a service industry and service-based, 85% of our costs are in the salary area, and cost increase through collective bargaining are a primary contributor to our bottom line. Jeff's going to walk us through the capital budget, and you'll see here the three areas where the pay-as-you-go contribution reduction has made a small change to capital.
Thank you, Deborah. The OPS aims to provide an adequate capital envelope to ensure that assets such as fleet, facilities, and information technology are replaced as required. For 2019, the capital budget request totals $36.6 million. Now this, if you recall from the presentation we made at the budget tabling, the original total was $37.2 million. This $600,000 reduction reflects the offsetting funding reduction from the pay-as-you-go plan that Deborah just mentioned. Overall, funding for these projects is essentially split evenly between debt and pay-as-you-go funding. The capital budget is broken down into three categories. Renewal of assets totals $8.2 million. This is required for fleet, IT infrastructure, and telecom facilities life cycle. These are entirely funded from pay-as-you-go sources. The fleet program saw a reduction of $200,000 from the previous budget submission. The growth category requires $18.2 million in funding, and this request is for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the new South Division Police Facility located in South Ottawa. This amount is entirely funded with debt, and the strategic initiatives category requires $10.2 million in funding. This is down from $10.6 million originally. There was a $200,000 reduction in growth costs and a $200,000 reduction in the facility and security initiatives line. The major project in this line item is the modernization roadmap for $8 million. Moving on to the 10-year capital forecast, the 10-year requirement is estimated at $265 million, and this is down from an original estimate of $271 million, reflecting 10 years of $600,000 reductions. The renewal of assets is the largest category and requires $121 million of funding. Growth projects total $49 million and is largely for the Phase 2 of the South Division. Debt funding is the primary source of funding for growth projects. Strategic initiatives account for $94.8 million of the forecast. The largest project included in this category is the new Central Patrol Facility, which is budgeted to cost $43 million. Funding for these projects will mainly come from debt and pay-as-you-go reserves. Overall, for the 10 years, the funding is split 64% from pay-as-you-go reserves, 35% from debt, and 1% from the sale of assets. In terms of the schedule and remaining timetable, there's one item left on the schedule after tonight, and that is City Council approval of the 2019 budget on March 6th. Now with that, I will close, and we're happy to open for questions. Modernization right now? Okay, sure.
Madam Chair, we're going to go right into the small deck that we prepared on the modernization roadmap. I'm going to ask my colleagues from Gartner to join me at the table, and they'll introduce themselves and outline their role in the modernization program. Perfect. Do you mind driving, Molly?
Madam Chair, Chris Litton. I'm with Gartner Consulting, my colleague Jason Wilson, and we provide the program management and quality assurance oversight for the modernization program.
Thank you, Chris. What they really mean is that they keep everybody's feet to the fire. So they keep the Ottawa Police Services staff feet to the fire to ensure that we carry out the program. They keep our partner, PwC, they keep their feet to the fire. And the Gartner's role is to ensure that the board gets the value and benefits that were outlined in the program and that we stay within the funding envelope. So he's very polite in his introduction, but his job is to beat us all up. Thank you for the opportunity just to kind of touch on the modernization roadmap. It's, as Jeff pointed out, it's a significant budget element. It's $8 million of the capital budget this year, and it's also one of the items that's included on the operating side, both to fund that capital and to pick up the costs of operating in the new modernized environment. So we'll be bringing a more detailed picture to the board because this It can be a little overwhelming to try and see it all at once, and Gartner is here as well to answer questions if you want to hear their independent view of how the program's doing. So the first slide we're going to look at kind of outlines, it looks an awful lot like yes, as usual with the technical IT thing, the IT doesn't work. Thank you very much, Jeff. What we've tried to depict on this slide is kind of the before and after picture that Ottawa Police is seeking. Now, and the before picture is a very challenging one. You know, when people ask us why did we undertake the roadmap, it's so that we can ensure that Ottawa Police can police effectively into the next decade. Because when we looked at our existing environment, we found how badly behind we had fallen when it came to providing up-to-date tools and information for our members. And that's what policing operates on. It operates on information. That's how crime is prevented and solved. But you need to have the right tools in place, and the right information has to be in place in order for it to be effective. And we found we were very ineffective. It's not something anyone particularly did on purpose, but I think there are 4 factors that really pushed us into the position that caused us to identify this as one of our top priorities. One of them is, and you'll see this in the bottom corner of the slide, is the data deluge that we are under right now. And that statistic should frighten everybody. 90% of the data that OPS has arrived in the last 2 years. So if you map that on a curve, the curve would fall over and smother itself, because that's how quickly data comes into the police service. And it's changed significantly because technology has changed. Now we receive tweets, we receive images from cell phones, we receive texts, we receive social media, we receive digitized copies of many things. That means that of all the data at OPS, 90% of it is less than 2 years old. So you can only ask yourself, well, what's going to happen in the next 2 years? We have to be prepared to work in that environment where the amount of data increases exponentially. The second issue on the data side is it's unstructured. And what that means is, you know, in the old days, you would enter data into a system, it would rest there nicely in a structured format, and you would search it and work on it. Well, now we receive data in all kinds of formats. And you know this yourself. When you get an email, how do you file that? How do you marry that up to a tweet? How do you attach that to an image? And then how can you search that data to find information that will help you prevent and solve crime? Because at the end of the day, that's the purpose of the information Ottawa Police needs, and it needs to be able to use it in real time and in an enabled way. What we found when we looked at ourselves, we have silos of data. There are more than 250 applications in play at Ottawa Police, and they each have data, and nobody wants to share their data with anybody else. So the data might be there to solve crimes. The data might be there to look at an issue in a different way. But it's not. We haven't handled it in a way that helps us do our job in this kind of environment. We have limited support for mobile work right now. Our frontline officers, from the beginning, they're almost probably the first in Canada to use mobile data terminals or a laptop that's mounted in a car. But we haven't provided the tools for them that allow them to unhook themselves from the car and do business while they're on their bikes and bikes and beat work, or the CID investigator that needs to go out and see a client. Those are the mobile work is the way that all business is moving now, because it allows the member to be much more efficient and to be able to be face-to-face with the client. The other issue we had is that we didn't have access to the kind of data that would help us improve service delivery. So service delivery for us is deployment of frontline members or other members to the scene of the crime so that they can deal with the issue. We don't have strong deployment data. Where are officers? At what point? What are they doing? And how can we ensure that we've given them the right task based on the operational priorities that are at hand? Our systems, and these would be some of our back office systems, don't provide us with that. So we had a really strong burning platform to engage in modernization. We had the picture on the right-hand side of the slide looks at actually how law enforcement is structured in a modern way by using end-to-end processes and by handing data and information so that we can do the job and have a comprehensive view of it. So that's where the modernization roadmap program is going to take us. We started the project with three principles, and they're actually on the bottom of this slide. And we came about them after some discussion, but primarily by talking with the police leader in the Netherlands who had adopted and worked on a similar project. And what he made clear to us is this is not a technology project. This is a business transformation project to help police officers do their work. And so we translated that into a principle called cop-centric. And you'll see that the way we're trying to manage the project and involve the front line in the project, that's to make sure that the tools and the information that gets put in place it will effectively serve our police officers. The second issue was partner first. Our closest partner is the city, and we've already seen the benefit of aligning our program with theirs, because there are significant. The city has a significant array of SAP solutions that can probably solve some of our program needs, primarily in the back office, I would imagine. Continually optimize, that's a hint to all of us in OPS that we always need to be looking at how we do business. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a technology solution. It can be through Lean Six Sigma work, which you'll see that we're taking on, to change processes, and to always be looking at improving our service to our client. So on top of that, we added some strategic objectives. There's more information on the slide about them, but essentially the first one says, to be effective, let's make sure that the tools that we choose are the right ones for our members. That's what's critical about this work. We need to get the information to the person in the right way at the right time. That's so that we can enable service delivery. Our work has to be done in a structured and rigorous way when we hand over information, when we use the automated tools, so that we have accountability and authority built into our systems. These are very sensitive information that we rely on to do our work. It needs to be clear that it's being handled in a rigorous way. We also need to ensure that our members see that information as legitimate and reliable. They need to know that it's come to the table and can be used for them to make important operational decisions, because that's the only reason we need the information, so they can do their job. We also want, number 5 is about achieving value, scalability, and flexibility. That's trying to make sure that we always keep our eye on the horizon, that what we do in the program will be good in the future for OPS as well. So this is a $41.3 million program. It's spread over 4 years, and that's why the funding envelope adjusts to match the program's needs. And we've broken it down into 7 work streams or capability areas. Each of the deputies and I are kind of the sponsors of each one of these. We've chosen ones that kind of match up with our strengths and our areas. So we are responsible for making sure that each one of these work streams succeeds by working with the teams that are engaged in them. Work is underway. We're ending year 2, or bundle 2 as it's known in our program language. So the work is well underway. We'll show you a little graphic that helps to emphasize that. And I think a couple of areas that are above the iceberg and a couple that are below the iceberg, but the one that's most significant operationally and is becoming visible is the deployment of frontline mobility tools. So frontline mobility is geared at ensuring that our officers can function wherever they are, that we provide the tools that they need for that. And one of the key tools, as almost anybody has experienced themselves, is a smartphone. So the smartphones are being deployed to all our frontline officers. That's the first phase of the work, so that they have a tool that will give them the information they need to make the decisions they need where they are. They won't be tied to having to go back to the vehicle to get that information, nor will they be tied to having to go back to the station in order to do their work. They can do it where they are, and they can provide information that will help other Ottawa Police members who are working downstream to do their work as well. So that's one of the focuses of our work this year. We completed the pilot, launched the pilot, and launched this initiative in Q4 last year. Associated with that, and a bit under the waterline, is the work that's been going on in information management. If Deputy Chief Skinner retired were here, she'd be jumping up and down because dashboards are actually going to come to life for us. Been doing a lot of work in the background to provide the security and the foundation, the infrastructure needed to put real-time information in the hands of our members so we can make good deployment decisions and good decisions about preventing and reducing crime. Steve Bell's been leading the innovation stream. This has been an important one for us because it's been where we have taken new ideas and worked with frontline members to put them out and pilot them so that our frontline members can see what's actually in the art of the possible. One of them, the facial recognition one, has been outstanding. Through facial recognition, which most people understand just watching TV, an image can be submitted. Our ident folks can then match it up through an algorithm to images we have in our database. And what has been often a 30-day exercise for one of our members to get the image around to see if people could recognize the individual is now fulfilled in less than 2 hours. So a 30-day exercise can be done almost immediately, which changes significantly the ability to solve crime and to prevent crime. So those kind of tools are available, and we'll be looking at how we can implement them. And it's the frontline members who are providing advice on the viability of them and ruling on whether they should go forward or not. So I've identified here with these little circles the other areas that are being implemented, one in each area in each quarter this year. So you'll see cloud technology in the foundation and security stream. That's our primary focus for Q1. The cloud is no longer a kind of a want to have. It's necessary for organizations like police services that where data and information is growing exponentially. It's not possible to manage that kind of data by thinking that you can continually add file servers to your environment. We need to be nimble and agile and as well have strong security around our information. The cloud is the solution to that. You'll see in Q2 that we introduce collaboration tools. That's primarily Office 365, and in a normal administrative setting, that would be a way for people to work collaboratively on paper-based projects. For us, it's quite different. It means that, yes, we'll be able to document, collaborate on documents, but more importantly, we'll have video conferencing. And we operate out of more than 18 buildings each day. Patrol briefings are held regularly between buildings. These kind of video conferencing options will help us do our business easily. We'll be able to do instant messaging on the platforms beyond the smartphone, and issues like our parade briefings, where we need to quickly put together information and collaborate on it, will become more seamless. In the member information system area, that's one of the ones that I lead. We are working very closely with the city we've identified what our requirements are. We've got a good feel for what we think we need to implement in order to bring our information to the table. We'll be working with the city in Q3 to start that work up and to bring some of those functions through the SAP modernization roadmap into our environment. The final one for Q4 is, it sounds like it's back office, but enterprise asset management is critical for policing. It's probably using an RFID tag attached to our assets that will be able to know where they are, who has them, as well as have information on when they need to be serviced or when they need to be replaced. And those are critical things for an environment that works on a 24/7 basis, where assets need to be handed off to the next member. So a lot of work. We're moving from the planning strategy side into implementation. And this next slide, which is the second last one, shows you the kind of planning. And I know it looks like a roadmap of New York from above, and there's a test at the end, and we couldn't get it translated. Actually, that's how difficult this is. This shows you the kind of integration and planning that that's kind of just required for a roadmap or a program of this size. So we've got 7 streams over 4 years. There are many interdependencies. So when the question came up, I was a bit at a loss. Can we change the roadmap? Can we adjust the expenditures? The answer is yes, of course, and Gardner will agree with that. I think the challenge for us is it's not an answer we can give in the heart of the moment. We would need to have a look at what could change and what that would affect, and where dependencies align, so that we don't impede our operational frontline mobility work. So we're open to making adjustments. Change orders are often the result of that. We need just a little bit more time to go back and have a look at what might be possible. So just to conclude then, we'll be bringing forward a full briefing in March. Everybody can do some YouTube learning in the meantime to get up to speed on all the language that goes with modernization and transformation. You can see that it's a highly integrated program. There is a sweet spot here, though, to align with the work with the city and their SAP work. We're lucky to be able to coordinate there. That's critical to the back office work that we want to align with them on. We're at implementation stages now in most of the work streams, so we need to be cautious about if we adjust, how we adjust, and we would just need some more time to look at the impact of reducing or changing program funding on the roadmap. So that's a very brief overview. Our colleagues from Gardner are here to answer questions as well, and we're ready to take questions on in whatever order you'd like to proceed on the budget as well. Thank you
very much, Ms. Fraser. So the way we want to proceed is ask Vice Chair Smallwood to read his motion on the budget before we call the public delegations, because I think it's important that the delegations know what's coming in terms of the changes to the original budget document before they take their time to speak. So Vice Chair Smallwood.
This could take a while. Okay. The budget reads as follows. The motion reads as follows. Whereas the board received and tabled the 2019 draft operating and capital budgets on February the 6th based on a 5.1% police tax rate increase, and whereas the service met with the city treasurer to moderate the police tax rate increase to 3% using revenue from red light cameras, the City of Ottawa Tax Stabilization Fund, and grant funding, and whereas the chair further directed the chief to prepare and present to the board at its Finance and Audit Committee meeting on the February the 20th a budget options list that does not impact frontline services to residents and moderates the service's reliance on new revenue sources. And whereas the Finance and Audit Committee met on February 20th to review and discuss the options list recommended by the chief, and whereas the board and the police service recognize the need to contribute to cost savings and reductions wherever possible, therefore be it resolved that the Ottawa Police Services Board approve a $2.4 million adjustment in the 2019 budget consisting of a $0.6 million reduction in pay-as-you-go contributions made up of $0.4 million in General Reserve Fund and $0.2 million Fleet Capital Reserve Fund. And I'll read out a page item, and that's where this can be found on the budget. So this item would be found on page 98. Further, a reduction in overtime expenses of $0.3 million, found on page 97. An increase to the gapping target of $0.5 million, found on page 97. An increase in paid duty revenue of $0.4 million, found on page 99. A revenue reduction of $0.4 million in background check fees, non-profit adjustment, found on page 99. A reduction to the fuel provision of $0.2 million, found on page 98. A total reduction to budgets for travel, training, supplies, services of $0.4 million, found on pages 97 and 98. A reduction to new services, community development, legal costs totaling $0.2 million, found on page 98. A reduction of the Criminal Investigation Directorate Project Fund of $0.1 million, found on page 98. A reduction to the carbine armoring provision of $0.1 million, found on page 98. Be it further resolved that the staff be directed to adjust the fees for city and for-profit off-duty policing assignments, paid duty, contracts by 15% by 1st of March 2019. Be it resolved that staff report back to the board in the second quarter of 2019 with adjustments to the fees for background checks, taking into account the need to fairly distribute the cost of the service amongst users. Be it further resolved that staff be directed to continue discussions with the City of Ottawa to identify efficiencies and savings from the transfer of back office functions to the City and report back on the progress of those discussions in the second third of 2019.
Okay. So we're going to hold this motion. We're going to go to public delegations.
Madam Chair, could I just ask a quick question about the wording?
Yes.
So the be it resolved that staff report back in the second quarter of 2019 with adjustments to the fees for background checks. Is that not more accurately to report back with options as to adjustments? Like it sounds like we're going to be presented with a plan rather than presented with alternatives.
I'm sure that would be friendly to change it to options.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So now we're going to hear from the public. I'd just like to note that we did receive 2 written submissions, one from Cheryl Perot from the Hintonburg Community Association and the other from Ottawa Sanctuary Network. We have currently registered 7 public delegations, and so we're going to ask them to come up and sit here, 5 minutes to make their presentation, and we'll start with Jasna Jennings, the Executive Director of the Byward Market BIA, and on deck is Suhail Ben Slimon.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Yasmin Jennings, Executive Director of the Byward Market BIA. Some of you already know me, and happy to introduce myself to those who haven't yet had, we haven't had the pleasure yet to meet. So thank you so much for your time today to speak on behalf of our over 600 Byward Market businesses. And in consideration of everyone's time, I'm going to be very, very brief. As the city's #1 tourist attraction and historic heart of the city, hosting an average of 10,000 visitors per weekend from tulips to leaves, the safety and security of our members and all visitors to the area is and has always been a primary focus for the Byward Market BIA. The true value of any organization is the manner in which it manages not only its budget, but its resources. As a business organization, our members are acutely aware of the challenges involved in managing an organization and understand the difficulties in making those tough decisions. The BIA has been very vocal over the last couple of years, outlining our concerns with the shift away from proactive district neighborhood officers model. We are extremely pleased to see a renewed focus on community policing, but that focus needs more than lip service. We are here today to stress the importance of meaningful investment to address the specific needs of our diverse and challenging communities. Investments must prioritize not only a team of dedicated officers, but also the background supports for that system. A system that focuses on problem-oriented, proactive approaches. A system that through dedicated officers can work in lockstep with the community to work together to achieve our common goals. A dedicated team of proactive officers provides the community with a consistent point of contact. Dedicated officers know all the players and understand the wide variety of stakeholders in the community. This intimate knowledge also helps to navigate the sometimes conflicting priorities of all these different players. A dedicated team also provides the community with a more senior officer as a primary contact, someone in a position of authority who can make decisions, one that can take immediate action and can truly affect positive change. What is currently proposed is a big step in the right direction. However, it still amounts to a small handful of officers covering a very large and diverse swath of the downtown. We need to see more dedicated officers, or better yet, more teams of dedicated officers to better manage the urban core, along with a robust system in place in the background to assist them. Over the years, we have enjoyed a fruitful and steadfast relationship with the Ottawa Police Service. We have witnessed firsthand the professionalism, hard work, and dedication of so many of these officers. As a valued partner, the Byward Market BIA looks forward to our continued work and efforts with the Ottawa Police Service, as we are looking forward to working towards these goals in partnership and collaboration with this newly appointed board. We invite all police services board members and all senior OPS staff to connect with us at any time to better understand our challenges and successes and to see how we can all work better together to achieve our common goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jennings. Are there any questions for the delegation? Member Meehan.
Hi, Yasna. It sounds as if you're looking for a dedicated team just to focus on the market. Would that be correct?
Well, I think we'd like to see that renewed focus to community policing that we enjoyed over the years. We had a lot of success through our ambassador program, through our monthly safety and security committee meetings. When we had a dedicated team, we were really able to address things proactively. When the shift moved away from the proactive work, we were challenged in who we could deal with, and I want to say this with the utmost respect for our community police officers that we've dealt with, the one that we are currently assigned. They are wonderful officers, they're hardworking officers, but at the end of the day, they are junior officers. And in the past, we had a dedicated team. We had senior officers, a staff sergeant and inspector, who could make decisions rapidly on things, whereas now we have to put in a request through a community officer who now has to go up the chain along with many, many other competing, requests. So we'd really like to see a return to, I don't think we're ever going to see what we had before, but we'd certainly like to see a return to the focus of that dedicated unit that was really so beneficial to the area.
Are the business members of the BIA, are they, how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how unhappy are they with the changes that we have implemented, like back in 2017?
The businesses certainly felt the impact of those changes. Immediately we saw kind of a shift on the day-to-day, I guess, street activity that we were experiencing, and there were some concerns. We have, though, through, our new community officer, we've certainly tried to adjust those changes, and he's worked very, very hard with us. But at the end of the day, that regular, steady, dedicated officer was so important. They knew who was who, and that was the biggest thing. Who's who on the street? We have probably close to 1,000 people staying in the 3 community shelters. So if you think of that, that's a huge number. Realistically, we have a very small handful of people that are really, really challenging. But when we had the dedicated officers, we could just drop a name and say, we're having a real problem with this person this week, and they knew who we were talking about. Without the dedicated officers, it's a lot more challenging to deal with those things in an immediate way.
Any other questions for Ms. Jennings? Seeing none, thank you for being here, Jasmine, and the point taken. We understand. Our next speaker is Suhail Ben Slimane, Criminalization and Punishment Education Project, and Suhail will be followed by Lisa Wright from the Overdose Prevention Ottawa. Can you just depress the button to turn your microphone on? Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Am I good now? Yeah, I'm good? All right. Thank you. So, as I said, the Criminalization and Punishment Education Project joins the call made by several other community members and stakeholders to speak out against the proposed budget increase requests made by the Ottawa Police Services to the City of Ottawa. We demand an end to police harassment and the unfettered use of violence that has resulted in the preventable deaths of Black, Indigenous, and other racialized peoples and marginalized community members. Our demands echo those of Ottawa Sanctuary City Network, Grassroots, Blackburns Orleans, Overdose Prevention Ottawa, No Pride in Policing, and other organizations across Canada and the world. Instead of increasing the OPS budget, we demand that the Police Services Board and the City of Ottawa divest from policing and direct equivalent resources into programs that are proven to create more cohesive and safe communities. The Criminalization and Punishment Education Project is an organization that aims to raise awareness about the harms of criminalization and punishment as responses to social conflicts and harms. We believe in community-based alternatives to countering social conflicts and harm. The people of Ottawa do not benefit from a police force which targets and victimizes the most vulnerable members of our community. Racialized and marginalized people in Ottawa do not feel safe around police officers, as the internal report released by the OPS Community Liaison Team highlights. The current justice system only benefits some while punishing our community's most vulnerable. The City of Ottawa should not allocate further financial resources to a police force which has a history of targeting marginalized groups, racialized folks, people experiencing homelessness, and people who use drugs. The City of Ottawa should divest from policing and invest in our communities instead. The problematic history and practices of OPS are going to be exacerbated by a bigger budget and more officers and more tools such as the FaceTime or whatnot. The tragic death of late Mr. Abdurrahman Abdi, which trial is taking place right as we speak next door at the courthouse, is a traumatic experience for his family, loved ones, supporters, and community members. We are forced to relive every second of the deadly encounter in which Mr. Abdi encountered the alleged murderous force used by Constable Daniel Monson. The ongoing trial related to Mr. Abdi's death reopens the wounds of the irreparable harms inflicted upon the community by OPS officers. Requesting further funding in the midst of this trial is a bold move by the OPS, especially considering that less than a month ago, Mr. Greg Ritchie was killed by OPS officers. Like Mr. Abdi, Mr. Ritchie, a racialized individual, was also living with mental illness. He was shot by OPS officers on his way to the pharmacy. Interactions with police officers are often fatal. When OPS officers arrest members of our community and send them to the notoriously dysfunctional and oppressive Ottawa Carlton Detention Center, they participate firsthand in the deterioration of the incarcerated individual's health and well-being. Many end up ending their own lives behind those walls of despair and isolation. Furthermore, research demonstrates that incarceration is directly linked to shorter lifespans, increased health problems, intergenerational trauma, and community breakdown. Thus, there is an insidious yet direct link between policing and the health and social harms experienced by those who have been criminalized and their loved ones. Even if the interactions between OPS...
Mr. Ben-Salman, your 5 minutes is up, so if you could just wrap up.
Yes, I will wrap up. So the violence in our streets is not the result of is not going to be solved by more police on duty. It is the direct product of heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, unlivable wages, oppressive policing practices, punitive carceral culture, unfair justice systems, barriers to harm reduction, racism and discrimination, poverty, lack of access to adequate healthcare services, housing, jobs, education, etc. Unless the budget is going to solve these problems, we demand that you don't increase that budget and you divest from policing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We don't normally allow that from the gallery, so if I could just ask you to not applaud in future, we'd appreciate it. Are there any questions for the delegation? I know he left, but we could bring him back if anyone has any questions for him. No? Seeing none? Thank you for your presentation. We'll move on to Lisa Wright, Overdose Prevention Ottawa, and Ms. Wright will be followed by Marie Eveline.
Hi, I'm here to talk today to express my concern over the proposed increase to the police services budget, as well as the adjustment that was presented here today. As a city, we need to divest from police and start investing in our communities through health and social services, education, food programs, rent geared to income, housing. An increase in the police budget means that we are divesting from our communities and we are choosing violence and exclusion instead of community support. Instead, I urge the Police Services Board to reject the requested increase in the police budget and instead support a decrease in funding of the Ottawa Police Services. I have 3 main concerns regarding the increase in the budget and where funding could be redirected to reduce the need for police. The first is the relationship between Ottawa Police and people who are accessing harm reduction services. The second is the number of police attending calls for service, and the last is the number of police on the Sunshine List. As an organizer at Overdose Prevention Ottawa and also a PhD candidate in the Department of Law and Legal Studies at Carleton University, I repeatedly heard stories of police harassing people while accessing harm reduction. These harassing tactics included following people as they walk through the city to access services, breaking drug-using community equipment that's distributed by Health and Social Services, mocking people who exert their rights and ask why they're being stopped by the police, and purposefully parking cruisers outside of services to deter attendance. These tactics create a barrier for accessing services, and people will die as a result of them. In Vancouver, Pivot Legal Society's Project Inclusion found very similar practices were being used to deter people from accessing harm reduction. Their research found that police practices directly and indirectly led to negative health outcomes, opioid-related harms, and safety issues for their study participants. Police actively disrupt harm reduction activities and the basic survival tactics that undermine the health and safety of residents. In the face of the ongoing overdose emergency, we need to ensure that the city is doing everything possible to prevent death, and this includes putting an end to these common police practices. Another common tactic by Ottawa Police is to have multiple officers attend calls for service. When people see multiple cruisers at a situation, they assume that there's a serious incident underway. However, this tactic has been used for something as mild as public drinking. If I were on the board and I was asked to approve an increase in the budget, I would ask to see data on how many police attend calls for service and how many police attend each different type of call for service. OPS's practices of overattendance is a means to inflate the need for police and to justify more funding. It takes away from other community services that can prevent interactions with the police from the beginning. In 2008, the budget for the Ottawa Police Services represented 9.5% of Ottawa's total expenditures, while the Toronto Police Services represented 8.8% of Toronto's total expenditures. Toronto is the largest city in Canada and the fourth largest city in North America. Ottawa may be a growing city, but our population is nowhere near the size of Toronto's. If we are spending a higher percentage in our expenditures in 2018 on policing, why does the police service need more funding now? Related to my questions about police overattendance is overtime pay and the number of Ottawa police on the Sunshine List. The Sunshine List every year publishes the names of people paid through public funds that make over $100,000 per year. In 2007, there were 3,363 employees of OPS on the Sunshine List. In 2018, that number more than doubled to 7,474 employees on the Ottawa Police Services, being paid over $100,000. Are police officers being paid this rate as their base pay, or is this a result of overtime? If it's a result of overtime, it may be important to know how officers are incentivized to do more overtime within the police services culture. What is the connection between police overattendance at calls for service and overtime pay? Police undermine safety for poor and working class, drug-using, racialized, and queer and trans residents. It is of the utmost importance for public funds to be spent responsibly and in keeping with evidence and to create a safe community for everyone. The $2.4 million adjustment presented here today is barely a drop in the bucket. OPS's budget should be decreased and funds should be allocated towards community initiatives and social services that are identified through community-based processes that have transparent budgets, are accountable to the community, and have shown that they can respond and support our safety and well-being. Increasing the police budget legitimizes the violent tactics used in Ottawa and inflates the need for surveillance, security, and regulatory tactics that target certain communities and benefit others. I'll wrap up. Thanks. Investing in the police means that we are divesting from our communities. To the city councillors on the board, you have the responsibility as the administrators of the public purse to listen to residents and also to listen to evidence. A multitude of evidence demonstrates that police are an inappropriate response to social issues and increase the harm through marginalization and criminalization inherent to the policing model and criminal legal system.
Thank you. We're going to hold you there. Your 5 minutes are up. But I do have a question for you. You quoted a figure of 9.5% of the overall budget of the police. I didn't think that was correct. So where did you get that number?
That was shared through a group of community members who have been researching the item. So if you want, I can send you
maybe I could
research.
just ask the chief to confirm if that is correct.
Madam Chair, approximately 8.95% of our budget is allocated from the city. So, we represent 8.95% of the total city budget, and that number has been fairly consistent for the past 10 to 15 years.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for your presentation. We appreciate it. Our next speaker is Marie Evelyn, Volunteer Ottawa, and Marie will be followed by Cheryl Parrott, Hindenburg Community Association.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present. As I said, I'm Marie Evelyn, Executive Director of Volunteer Ottawa. We've been around for over 60 years in terms of helping not-for-profits in this community serve the most vulnerable. We do that through our volunteer matching system, where we place over 7,000 volunteers annually, but also we provide resources to not-for-profits to ensure that they can fulfill their mandates. I'm here to talk about the issue of background checks and the costs that they have on our community and our not-for-profit organizations, specifically with regard to the change from the $15 to the $90 fee for employees. and the impact that has in the short term on a lot of our members and the impact it may have in the long term. I was very pleased to hear about the amendment to the budget, which is going to address in the short term the impact that has on not-for-profit organizations. We look forward to hearing the details of how that's going to work and informing our members about how they can access those funds. We do represent over 300 not-for-profits and charities in the city, so their interest in this issue is quite wide. I'm more concerned about the long-term impact and long-term discussions around options for policy with regard to background checks. It's a little vague to say that you're going to look at options to fairly distribute the costs among all users. I hope that doesn't mean we're going to reopen the issue around volunteers needing to pay for background checks. There was an extensive discussion and consultation process last year on that issue, and we were very pleased to hear that volunteers wouldn't be included. And I want to stress the importance that volunteers do play in Ottawa in ensuring that the needs of the most vulnerable are met. I'm also concerned that you want to report by the second quarter. That doesn't really provide a lot of time to do consultation with our sector and with other individuals and groups that will be impacted by any change in policy. So I do encourage you to ensure that there is a comprehensive consultation process so that we can all provide input into any policy options that are being considered and the impact it does have on the not-for-profit sector. So I'd also like to ask that in looking at policy options, you do look at the issue of whether you want to provide for full cost recovery. That may not be realistic, and you may have to look at other options around supporting the not-for-profit sector. I just want to leave with you with a couple of statistics around the important role of volunteers. According to the Statistics Canada 2013 survey of volunteering in Canada, Ottawa volunteers contribute 55 million hours a year to change in this community, for an estimated value of $1.3 billion. We can't underestimate the role that volunteers play in this community and the important role it plays in serving the most vulnerable. So we support criminal record checks because we have to ensure that these vulnerable individuals are protected, but I want to make sure that the role that is recognized and that the impact on the not-for-profit sector is considered when you look at policy options.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think what we're envisioning at this point, and it was me that had put forward the motion, is really a tweak to last year's policy. We don't imagine going back and doing a complete new public consultation. I know a lot of work was done. We have heard expressions of concern, especially around the not-for-profit sector, and actually being asked to pay $90, which is above the break-even point for that sector, which is $63. So there is money in the budget to address that. I think we're looking for some flexibility when they come back and how it will be addressed. But it's not going to be a complete overhaul of the policy. It's really focusing primarily on the not-for-profit sector. Maybe there'll have to be some tweaks in other areas in order to deal with it, but there will probably be tweaks as opposed to major policy change.
Okay. Well, as long as we are included in any discussion so we can provide input into options, because we can survey our members very quickly and get their feedback so that any policy you develop, you want to have support from the sector, and I think we can help you with that.
Well, we will bring a policy to this board, so there'll certainly be an opportunity for input before it's carried. So thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. Our next speaker is Cheryl Perot from the Hittenburg Community Association, and Ms. Perot will be followed by Lily Zai from the Ottawa Sanctuary Network.
Chair and board members, thanks for the opportunity to present. The Hittenburg Community Association is really pleased to see the Bikes and Beats team that started January 1st this year. We haven't seen them much, but we hope that they'll be in our community. We know that they will go in a number of communities. So it's a very small unit, but it's a start in the right direction, and we really do appreciate it. The visible presence on the street is so very important for our communities. We support the funding and establishment of the community response team.
They'll make up a small amount of the loss that we felt when the neighborhood officer unit was dismantled. Again, it's a start, but not where we need to be. The numbers in the budget document were quite startling when I looked at it. The population per police member increased from 479 to 529 in years 2011 to 2017, leaving us with far fewer officers per population than we had 6 years ago, and the city has expanded. And we're less than 8 smaller and larger cities in Canada. The reorganization of the OPS over the last several years has severely reduced community policing. It's reduced the overall police response, made reporting so very difficult, and been detrimental to safety in the city. The SI was a cost-cutting exercise dressed up as a modernization program. Dismantling the district model has reduced the accountability that used to exist. Who knows who you contact these days and who does what? And once you do find out, then it changes. So even that contact has been lost. The lack of adequate staffing has resulted in citizens calling about a crime in progress, i.e. cars being broken into, and being told no officer will be sent, do an online report, calling back and getting the same response. Residents and businesses saying they're giving up calling for reoccurring disorder problems, either because they're told no officer will be dispatched or because they never see an officer respond. They're saying they'll deal with the problems themselves, and that's not a solution any of us want to see. Community police officers' territory has been doubled. The workload tripled or quadrupled, and all their critical effective backup has been dismantled with the NHO officers. Theft from vehicles have just skyrocketed. I work in retail, and theft from shop is huge. Online reporting for some issues is frustrating and time-consuming if you've ever done it yourself. And there's not any follow-up. So losing $4 and change from your car that's been gone through takes you 20 minutes to do an online report, and then you get an email that you missed something or you didn't answer it correctly a few days later. It's so very frustrating that most people won't ever do it again if they manage to struggle through it the first time. And reporting on drug houses is really no different. We were told that the demand for service would adequately replace the NHOs. It doesn't. It's a failure. Officers no longer know the neighborhoods they're working in. And we know that this was due to budget constraints over the last many years, and that the complement of officers is too low. So please adequately resource the OPS to get us back to where we were a few short years ago, and press the OPS to go back to district policing model. Investment in proactive policing pays bigger dividends than reactive policing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pearl. Don't go away. There's a question for you, Member Agli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You raised an issue that's also been raised by my constituents about the online reporting system. I think we're probably too far down that road to pull it back. I think it's now part of the framework. But if that's the case, that online reporting is going to continue, in your perfect world, what would online reporting look like? How would you tell us to make it more user-friendly?
So similar to the City of Ottawa online reporting, which is super easy. I know you need more information, but going through 4 pages and having to get your license plate and your VIN just to report $4 in lost change, and they didn't have a category for lost change, so I had to put a wallet. Then I got an email saying what color was the wallet. Well, I didn't have a wallet. So it's got to be made more simple. I understand. It's very helpful. I love the City of Ottawa online reporting, but this is just you want to find a brick wall to hit your head against it. And the drug reporting is actually easier than losing $4 in change reporting.
So is it the lack of options on the drop-down, or are there too many options on the drop-down?
Oh, there's too many options, and you have to fill them in. And there's no, even though you have a place for where you can write in information, it still doesn't seem to get around this problem that if you don't have the right option, you're still stuck, and then you confuse them, and then that delays it. And if you don't answer the email within a period of time, it just falls off the map. They tell you that. So it is a frustrating experience. And if you've ever done it once, you're not likely to ever do it again unless you're really stubborn.
And what did you say the turnaround time on the email was?
I think you had 2 days.
No, I mean between when you reported, when you got an email saying there was a problem with the report.
I think it was 2 days for me, and then I had 2 days to reply. So I replied, and it just goes in a black hole. So the feeling is that what's the point? And that's what people have said to me is, what's the point?
Okay, thank you for that.
Member Meehan?
I just want to pick up on something you alluded to, that you said the residents are frustrated. Some of them are thinking about taking things into their own hands. What did you mean by that?
We had a meeting with some of the businesses who said, they continually call the police. Nobody ever shows up that they've ever seen. The problem is continuing. So a number of the businesses, the men in the businesses, have kind of banded together, and they said, we're going to do it ourselves. And this is some disorder in a public park.
Do what themselves?
They didn't explain that.
Are you talking about sort of I don't want to call them vigilant. I was talking about controlling other people by these guys?
Well, I would assume that they would go out and talk to them and try to move them along, but that's what I'm just kind of assuming. But, after continuous things go on, people's tempers tend to flare, and so that's not a good thing. But the frustration is that they phone and they don't see a response, and they don't see anything changing, or over a period of 4 months. So the frustration then builds.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Member Meehan. Member Newman?
Hello. I have a small question. You have commented that officers no longer know the neighborhoods they are working in. I know that we are encouraging, or the police is encouraging a neighborhood watch. So, for instance, the officer is in your area. Are you planning to have meetings, maybe community meetings or the neighborhood meetings with that officers, so they can know each other? Because if any officers just walk in, nobody will come to know. So I just want your comments on that.
We do have a community police officer that everybody works very closely with. But it's the officers on patrol who change regularly. And, if they get out and start talking to people, that's good. They get to know people. But with the district model of policing, those officers were tied to an area, and they got to know, as Yasna mentioned, who's the players and who's not. They get to know who's who to talk to, who to get information from, and who is likely to cause a problem, and where some of the problems are.
So just a small clarification. So the officers have been regularly changed, or what is the frequency of those officers, what you have indicated in your letter?
Well, now patrol is sort of all over the place. So they might be in Canada one day and Orleans in the next. So there's less focus on an area. When they were tied to a district, they got to know people. And that just is huge. If there's someone with mental health issues, then they know that they're there. So if there's a call, they have some background.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions to the delegation? Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Lily Zai, Ottawa Sanctuary Network, and Ms. Zai will be followed by Lucy Marlowe.
Hello.
So I am here representing the Ottawa Sanctuary Network. We are a diverse group of advocates, migrants, academics, and service providers working together to build a welcoming community where everyone, regardless of immigration status, has access to public services without the fear of detention or deportation. So in that spirit, we are here to express our concern with respect to the proposed 2019 budget of the Ottawa Police Service, the proposed increase in budget. So the Ottawa Police Service collaborates with the Canada Border Service Agency in order to remove individuals who may have precarious immigration status. The OPS does so even when not expressly required by statute. We are concerned that by increasing the number of police officers through this proposed injection of new funds, this collaboration will only be increased. We are concerned that this collaboration contributes to creating a climate of fear among members of our community who live with precarious immigration status. Our members, including frontline service provision agencies, presented to the Community and Protective Service Committee in the winter of 2017 with evidence of this concern. We also note that the OPS has been criticized for the impact of racist policing on communities of color in Ottawa. Despite this, the proposed $300 million budget only allocates $100,000 to the multi-year action plan on bias-neutral policing. And while we do not believe that simply allocating more funds to this plan is the solution, it is also not comforting to over-police communities to see an increase in city spending on police services that focuses on hiring more officers. Additionally, this is an increase in police service funding that relies on $2.4 million of funding from city reserves, and from the presentation today seems to me at least like it's likely to go over budget based on the reductions from reevaluation of old numbers rather than it seems a tangible reduction in actual police budget items. In our view, the City of Ottawa should be directing these funds to community development initiatives such as affordable housing. For example, the funds recently approved by City Council to put towards affordable housing does not include adequate funding for deferred maintenance, and we are concerned that the City of Ottawa is neglecting investments in adequate affordable housing to house those in need. Given that the city has recently sought to lay blame at the feet of other levels of government for inadequate emergency shelter space for refugee claimants, it is particularly concerning to us that the city would show a willingness to spend millions in new funding on the police service instead. For these reasons, we urge the Ottawa Police Service Board to reject any increases to the OPS budget. We recommend to City Council that the proposed new funding for the OPS be directed instead to initiatives such as adequate and affordable housing, expanded mental health services, and alternatives to policing. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you. And our final presenter tonight is Lucy Marlowe from Crime Prevention Vanier.
Hello. I'm very nervous. Public speaking is up there with my hate of earwigs, so if I stumble, then please be tolerant. My name is Lucy Marlowe. I'm the founder of Crime Prevention Vanier and the Neighborhood Watch Program Volunteer Coordinator in Vanier. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today. I've been active in community safety and crime prevention in Vanier since 2007. One would hope that my community work would be easier after 12 years in the game, but it isn't. Far from it. Since early 2015, it has been increasingly difficult. Some of the setbacks we've encountered include Bill C-36, the Protection of Community and Exploited Persons Act, commonly known as the Prostitution Law, that came out in December 2014. the revised carding or street check provincial policy that coincided with the Ottawa Police Service Delivery Model in January 2017, the loss of neighborhood officers, 6 community police officers in Vanier since 2007, which averages to a new community police officer every 2 years or less, not including the months-long gaps between community police officers at time, and no transfer of knowledge between the former community police officer and the new. The addition of 3 new neighborhoods to our community police officer catchment area, which of course is detrimental in and of itself. Limiting our crime prevention, our community police officers' involvement in and attention to safety issues in Vanier, not to mention attendance of community meetings and events. We spent years promoting the Ottawa Police Service reporting number to very reticent residents, only to have that number discontinued. And don't get me started on the insistence by Ottawa Police that residents should report online sometimes by its own frontline officers and communications center. I could go on, but I think you get the point, so I'll move on. Out of the mess of the new service delivery model, neighborhoods only achieve 2 gains in my view: the extension of the community police officer mandate to 5 years, unless he or she chooses to leave early, which has happened in Vanier, and the operationalizing of the transfer of knowledge between community police officers, though not enough time has gone by for me to know if this will occur consistently in Vanier. There's also the Ottawa Police Service formalized community network that was tested in 2 priority neighborhoods, but I don't know what came out of that. I attended the last public police service board meeting, and it was very refreshing to hear all of you support additional funding for neighborhood policing. Note that I use the term neighborhood as opposed to the Ottawa Police term of community policing, given how broadly that term is applied by the Ottawa Police. I'm here to speak to you today on neighborhood policing specifically. So I'll spare you the repetition of what you know and what you've heard of the pleas of return to neighborhood-specific policing and the resources to match. At the Ottawa Police Human Rights Forum last December, some of you heard from the former Boston Police Commissioner about how instrumental neighborhood and community policing is for effective, sustainable policing. That police have to think beyond the strictly law enforcement approach, that it must be about community engagement and crime prevention, that it's about reaching the youth, attending events, collaborating with grassroots community groups, and implementing proven crime prevention measures. That's all Mr. Evans talked about. When asked what best practice would he suggest to the Ottawa Police, he answered community policing, plain and simple.
5 minutes is up, so if you could just wrap up.
Thank you. And by the way, the Boston Police have an ice cream truck, so just something for you guys to think about. Listen, we're working very hard in Vanier to make up for the Ottawa Police short-sightedness. We established a safety committee. We have an active neighborhood watch program. We also have the post-incident protocol, which unfortunately we have to activate almost every month. We do this because we don't have a choice. Believe me, we would much rather be spending our time and energy on beautifying public spaces and planning parties.
We're going to hold you there because it's just
I do have copies.
Okay, if you could share them with us, we'd be happy to distribute them. Are there any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you for being here. That ends the public delegations. We'll now turn to questions to staff. And we'll start with Vice Chair Smallwood.
Thank you very much. My question also is to our value consultant. So before I ask the question, I just wanted to thank the Director General. That was a very comprehensive report. Thank you very much. It's a huge project, and I think because of that, and because one of the points you had raised was value and benefits, and one of the things in the motion that I put forward was with respect to the efficiencies and savings from the transfer of back office functions. So a bunch of things come together in my mind at the same time. One is obviously the magnitude, $41.3 million. We have a new board primarily. I think it would be really beneficial if you're able to come back to us with some sort of quick overview for the board that talks about the cost-benefit analysis. We're spending $41.3 million. What benefits do we get out of that? What's the cost effect? What's the savings, if any, out of that? If you can just make sure the board's aware. And in particular, a concern I have is that we be able to understand. I would be very concerned if we were giving if we've given contracts that are creating an infrastructure that may be creating something within the police service that as a result of your looking at the transfer of back office functions, we may end up not needing. So I would like some sort of, before we let any major contracts out or additional contracts, I'd like confirmation from you that we're not creating something as a result of these efficiencies you're looking at, and should we be halting or pausing for a second, not with respect to the frontline mobility, which I understand is already underway, and that's good, that's great, but just with respect to letting out contracts that might affect the integration of the back office thing. So I don't know that you can answer that now, but assuming you can't, I think it would be, I would like to know that that's what happens going forward. Is that?
Certainly. So, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I choose not to answer that at this time without the actual factual data with me. However, I would emphasize that one of the reports, one of the continuous monthly and quarterly reporting exercises that we do undertake, we do put pressure on the individuals within the team to continually be analyzing value back to the organization. So that is one of the 28 measures that we're continually watching and looking for. So as I believe DG Fraser mentioned, she will be coming back next month with a more comprehensive report. I would recommend that is included within that the value, some of those value metrics and those value measures that are there. Certainly we believe there is value. We believe the initial business case that was made and put forward has value. Obviously, a program of this size, there is always risk. There's always risk to how the money is spent and the efficiencies. And I think you're alluding to probably things like investment in cloud infrastructure versus physical infrastructure. Of course, we hear that across the technology spectrum in general. I know the team that is supporting that are continually looking at those elements and certainly questioning that. But if it's all right with the board, I would recommend that be included in the next month's more comprehensive presentation, if that's acceptable.
Thank you, Member Smallwood. Member Aggai.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions for these gentlemen and then some for staff. So just to follow up on something you said, so you're saying you prepare a monthly report.
Sorry, clarify that. There's a formal quarterly report, and what we do is we continually provide monthly oversight and update to that. So we're looking for trends, we're looking for positive and negative trends to monitor to see that the program sponsors are taking action against some of those potential.
So who gets that update? Because we don't.
That's provided to the steering committee.
Sorry, Madam Chair. The board, the quarterly reports go to the FAC committee, so we table them there. We had planned actually to table the most recent one at the last meeting, but it was becoming overwhelming from a business point of view. So you'll see it at the next meeting, because there will also be a request to look at the 2019 funding of Bundle 3. So you'll see the quarterly there, and Gartner will be there to speak to it as well.
Okay. And the other question I had is the Vice Chair had asked for sort of a cost-benefit analysis. something about, perhaps, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, what the projected operational costs are going to be versus what the projected yearly savings are going to be when full implementation. That's something I would like to know, certainly. And the other thing I would like to know, building on what the Vice Chair asked in terms of not wanting to conflict with the city and any efficiencies that might be created, is whether the city's IT department has had a fulsome view of what the proposal is going forward and what their feedback may have been in terms of how we can create these efficiencies. Does that work for you as well?
So I was just clarifying with my colleague here, just specifically within the city's involvement with oversight. I know our role, and that we certainly have provided QA assistance. We review deliverables, we review statements of work to analyze for some of those efficiencies and gains, and overspends or duplications of spend, etc. But certainly I cannot speak to the depth within which the city has perhaps reviewed those statements of work.
So you don't have any feedback directly from the city's IT department about potential efficiencies?
That is not within my specific tasks within what we do at this point.
But as I understand your role, you're to advise the board as well as the police services about how effective this whole project can be. Have I got that wrong?
No, perfectly true. And there are elements like the MIS program, and there are those program elements where the SAP, for example, have been great examples of where there are obvious efficiencies to collaborate with the city. And those recommendations, if you go back through some of our recommendations, have been to encourage the program to work with their partners within the city to seek out those types of efficiencies where they are there. So,
but you're not privy to that feedback, is what you're saying? Because it seems to me to be hard to do your job without having that feedback.
Dear Madam Chair, we do interview OPS members with regards to their alignment to the City of Ottawa in the spirit of partner first strategic objective and guiding principle. So we certainly question the level of integration, the level of communication, the level of alignment with the city. We assess risk and we provide recommendations around that, but we have not spoken to any City of Ottawa officials.
So to be fair, you're making the assessment, and no disrespect here, but you're making the assessment on the feedback of only one of the partners.
Correct.
And so I would suggest you can't fully do your job until you talk to all the partners. We're talking about the integration of back office. So how can we remedy that?
Include that in the scope of work, include some additional interviewees. Certainly that would be something that we would consider.
It just seems to me you're getting half the pie.
Certainly.
And it would be difficult to advise us properly about what efficiencies and benefits there may be in partnering with the City of Ottawa if you haven't had any direct feedback from the City of Ottawa. So perhaps when you come back and report, you can tell us how you might integrate that into your process going forward.
Certainly. That would be more than welcome to do that.
Thank you. Now, I want to get back to the budget, if I could.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt, but is there an opportunity for maybe us to provide Member Aguilar with some information as far as the fact that we are working closely with the city, there are integration plans? I wouldn't want to have the board left with the impression that we're not having any discussions with the city as far as how we could work together, like with the fire service and all those areas, and integrating payroll and those pieces. So I'll ask if that's okay?
Yes.
And Chief, I wasn't suggesting that wasn't happening. What I was suggesting is my understanding, and I'm new to the board, but my understanding from comments made at the last meeting is Gartner's role is to advise the board on whether we're heading in the right direction, whether we're getting those efficiencies, and I think it's difficult for them to do that if they don't have first-hand input from one of the major partners, being the city's IT department. I wasn't suggesting the work wasn't going on. I just think in order to fulfill their role, they should have feedback from both parties. I'm happy to meet and hear what's going on, absolutely, but I think their role is a bit different.
Leave it at that? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor.
So now to get back to the sort of the budget piece in a more direct way, we talked a little bit about gapping, and I promise I just want to put it to rest. So I think you're quite right, Director General, that there is a disagreement, if you will, between the city, well, not a disagreement, but a difference in philosophy as to how gapping works. Both sides appreciate that the gapping is done differently. My concern was about the fact that with the gapping process in place, OPS has shown over the last number of years a deficit, if you will, in terms of the compensation piece. And so what I'd like to know is, going forward with the gapping proposal you have in the budget, what controls you put in place to make sure that we're not simply adding another $500,000 to the compensation deficit. What sort of things are you going to use to monitor the progress?
Excellent. Thank you, Board Member. I relish the opportunity to discuss gapping more in the public domain. So I think what we learned is that the city has a somewhat different format for analyzing gapping, and it tends to look at all of the compensation elements and determine whether they've been met or if there's a positive variance out of them. Ottawa Police does it a little bit differently. We look at gapping on its own to see whether or not our estimate of our salary savings from vacant positions is on the money or not. And what we found is that, yes, over the last 2 years when we looked just at gapping, that we have exceeded our gapping estimate by $500,000. Now, what the city treasurer, the good discussion we had was, well, Deborah, that might be the case, but you've exceeded your compensation spending on retirement. So the city would say, no, that plays in our gapping. And I agreed with her. We had in the past underestimated our retirement amount, but we've increased it in 2019, which should help to soften that aspect of the compensation analysis. The other area where we were overspent on compensation is in backfilling members of our police service who are on a long-term leave of absence through WSIB. And often that relates to an occupational stress matter, which is now presumptive legislation. So we had 11 members in that situation in 2018. They were off. There was no backfill salary to backfill them and ensure their operational duties could be undertaken. So we were overspent by 11 salaries worth last year. We've corrected that in the 2019 budget. There are provisions for that amount, and we've brought our retirement account closer to the expected amount. So we've fine-tuned 3 compensation items, which will help to increase the compensation budget and offset these pressures. And we think that the recommendation we made around gapping to take it up $500,000 to what the actual experience is, that all of that will create a balance in the compensation area. And then we can as well reflect the city's analysis, which takes all of those into account to come to the bottom line for gapping.
Am I also correct that you're moving to a monthly monitoring program for it as well?
Correct. The finance people in the room don't know that yet, Councillor, but now they do. We're moving to monthly analysis of the gapping and compensation areas.
Thank you for that clarification. Just quickly, it's budget related because it came up through a number of the delegations. We heard about frustration with the online reporting system, and we've heard that in other venues as well. And I'm just wondering, Chief, what we can look forward to going forward. We heard a lot of good suggestions tonight, I think. What we can look forward to going forward in terms of amending the screen that someone sees, or how to make it simpler or easier to work with, and when that might happen.
Madam Chair, we're always looking to improve the face-fronting services that we're providing to our citizens, and online reporting is one of those. I'm pleased to report that over the past year, online reporting has exponentially increased. I think last year we had 6,000 reports. To date, we have 40,000 reports online 14,000 reports so far, so it's actually doubled. We understand some of the frustrations. We're always looking to, with our vendor, to actually make sure that it's more user-friendly. One of the areas we looked at is there was frustration by certain members of the community that they couldn't report hate crime or certain types of crimes online. We've changed that, and we are allowing those types of reports to be submitted. What's critical to us is to have the right information collected so that can be passed along to crime analysts so we can identify trends or patterns and deploy our resources where we need them sooner than later when we see spikes in crimes taking place. So having that online reporting system frees up officers from not having to attend calls for service, and also has helped us manage a number of staff that we need to take the phone calls and take the reports over the phone. So we're trying to give our residents different options to be able to report crime. And we are trying to make that more user-friendly. Absolutely.
Are people being told, though, when they phone in that the report won't be taken?
No, and I heard stories that, if a person calls to report a crime in progress, car break-ins that are happening right now, that we're not going to send an officer. I'd love to hear the details of that, because that should not be happening at all. Crimes in progress, our officers, our comm centers will be dispatching cars to the scene. We do try to encourage residents, where possible, to report online, where there's no value in sending a police officer, there's no evidence to collect. Most police services have looked at different options on alternatives, and online is one of those options. So we are trying to increase the level of online reportings that is taking place, as opposed to taking over the phone or sending an officer, because we want to be able to maximize the use of our officers in other emergency calls for service, and try to be proactive in their neighborhoods.
But just for clarity, we're not telling people we're not going to take your report.
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's important. And I also want to thank you, Chief, and Director General and the Chair. When we last met about the budget, I wasn't thrilled, to say the least. I think a lot of hard work has gone in here, and we met as recently as today at noon, still talking about and working on it. So I just want to thank you for rolling up your sleeves, sharpening your pencils, and coming up with a plan that I think everybody around this table, I hope everybody around this table, can support going forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Member Aguilar. Member Meehan?
Chief, I was glad to hear some of the groups today say that we're taking a good step forward when it comes to replenishing some of the resources that they feel that they have lost in the community. So, but we're hearing pleas from, I guess, the BIA and the people in Hintonburg and Vanier that they're still feeling that for lack of a better word, that deficit of officers on the street. And these communities obviously have unique needs. Is there something that you can tell them that would make them leave here tonight with a bit of optimism that things could be better in these communities, because they're here for a reason? I mean, we all talk about, we'd like it to go back to the, prior to 2017. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But I think they need to take something back to their communities tonight that says that we are listening and we understand that we're going to do something for them.
Madam Chair, I think every community in this huge city has their own unique needs, and that's part of the challenge that our police service has, is to ensure that we are meeting all the different communities' needs, whether it be urban, rural, or suburban. The demographics, the socioeconomic status of different communities, they all have their different needs. I'm proud of the work that our officers do each and every day. Our officers, contrary to what we heard tonight, our officers do patrol in sectors. They do patrol in specific neighborhoods. On the rare occasion we may have to move resources across the city to deal with major incidents that are taking place. We need to have that flexibility, that mobility. We've listened and we've heard loudly around the gap that was created around the new service delivery model. We have reintroduced our Bikes and Beats unit full-time, the same officers patrolling and getting to know those community members. our new community response unit, should the budget be approved. That community response unit will be built in 2019. And we continue to make sure that our officers are out there listening and working with our community partners. You know, just over the weekend, I saw a number of activities on Twitter around the great work that our officers, our community police centers officers are doing, participating in neighborhood events, our school resource officers. That has never gone away, and we will continue to make sure that we focus on those different neighborhood needs.
Is that it? Are there any other questions from board members on the budget? Okay, so can we carry Member Smallwood's amendments? Okay, just as amended. Okay, carried. And then we do have to just carry the budget. Before we do, I just want to make a brief comment, and that was I want to thank the members of the public who came out to speak this evening. I was struck that there were two kind of competing views. One that suggested we should be looking to reduce the numbers of officers, and that sentiment seemed to be based in the view that we need to have a respectful, bias-neutral policing. And I would say to you that regardless of the complement of sworn officers in the city, that you are fundamentally correct, that that is something that we should strive for, and I believe the Ottawa Police Service is very cognizant of the need to strive for exactly that. To the members of the public who suggest we should be amping up the number of officers, especially in the area of neighborhood officers and community officers, I think that's very consistent with the message that this board received when they did their strategic initiative last summer and visited different communities throughout the city. I think that the police service, the chief and his senior team have heard that message loud and clear. I think it's in the forefront of their minds, and it's something that we will continue to work on addressing as we move forward, because I, like you, believe that the police officers having a knowledge of the community and its citizens is very, very important. And for all of you who suggested that there should be more investments in upfront crime prevention and programs and affordable housing, I couldn't agree more with you. I think that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that we need, as a city of Ottawa, outside maybe the work that this board does, but certainly the members of council on this board know that we need to be getting more money into preventative programs in our community. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming out tonight and for joining in the conversation. It makes our job easier, and it makes for a better city when we have public input. So thank you very much. So carried on the budget? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so now is there any other business? No? So now I'm going to move that we go in camera. The original agenda went out without noting the in-camera items, and we have committed to making those in-camera items known, so I'm just going to read them out. Number 1 is the Executive Succession Management Program Annual Report. Number 2 is legal identification. 3 was chief recruitment, but we made a decision to do that in public, which we did earlier tonight, so that's been removed. And the third one now is a personnel matter about an identifiable individual. So move to go on camera. Carried? Thank you. Our next meeting will be Monday, March 25th, 2019 at 4 p.m. So this part of the meeting is adjourned.